morning, class, the receiving school students and teachers.
Good morning, Mrs. Watangas.
How are you all this morning?
We are very well, thank you. And how are you this morning?
Very well, just like you all. Thank you. You may be seated. Now, I'd like all of us to have a look at what we have on the screen, receiving school students as well. And we have a phrase which says food from raw materials. Food from raw materials. And the pictures we have clearly tells you what our lesson is going to be about. Now here, we are going to be looking at food processing. Food processing. Now, I'd like someone to tell me what processing is. What is processing? And this has to do with food. What is processing? Can I have someone to tell me? Let's have Linda, if you can tell us what processing is. What is processing?
Way of preparing.
Come on again.
Way of preparing.
The way you
Preparing the food.
prepare. Okay, good. Let's have Hayano.
To prepare certain food in a series of series of steps or actions.
Very good. To do something in a series of steps or actions. And in here, we are talking about food especially. How certain type of food or how foods are prepared. Now, we just had a look at our phrase for this lesson, which is food from raw materials. Now, if we have food like cacao, taro, bananas, we just get them straight from wherever we have planted. But there are others that we have to get them out of certain plants. Now, this morning, we have a guest speaker. She will come in later in the lesson and introduce herself to us. But if you look at what we have for a topic for this lesson, it is on Sago processing. Now, our students, especially those in the highlands, and some of us on the coastal areas, if you haven't seen a sago palm tree, you can have a look at the actual sago palm tree on the screen. That is how a sago palm or sago palm trees look like. They're as tall as coconut trees. However, in features, they are different from coconut trees. Now, I also have on the slide that says, on the screen, it says tree of life. Now, can someone tell me why sago palm trees are known as trees of life or tree of life? Okay, we have Adrian.
Because people benefit from it.
Okay, people benefit from sago palm trees. How? In what ways? Shane, in what ways do people benefit from sago palm trees?
By gathering food and help build the houses.
Very good. By gathering food from it, getting food from it, and using the leaves, especially for roofs of houses. Now, our activity is basically on you listening and taking note, especially of the different sago processing stages that you will hear from our guest speaker this morning. Now, processing raw materials. If I can have Gail, if you can read it for us, what it says about raw materials.
Processing raw materials can produce food. Sago can be made from a plant like other foods.
Okay, other foods besides sago, they can be produced from raw material. Now, we had a look at a sago palm tree. from that tree or from that plant, we can get or make food. And that is exactly what you will be looking at as we go along. Now, it also says flour can be made from sago and other foods. Can somebody tell me some other foods besides sago that we can make flour out of? Anyone? Yes, Aloysia?
Wheat.
Wheat, yeah, from a plant wheat. Wheat is a raw material, but from that plant wheat, we can get flour out of it. Now, flour here, I have a sample of flour from Sago. Now, students in the receiving schools, those of you who have never seen Sago, flour from Sago, this is flour from Sago. That tree that you have seen earlier, from that tree, we can get this food. And this is the flour that is made from sago. Now, from this flour here, flour made from sago, this sago flour can be used to make a lot of or different types of food dishes. If I can have Raymond, if you can give us an example of one food dish, probably from your area, made from sago flour.
Nikiriki.
Okay, good. So that is what it's called in Raymond's language, and they use sago flour for that. Now, the sago flour we have, students, this is raw. This is raw sago. It's not cooked. In some areas, you will see that once the sago is produced, they have only powder like this. Okay, flour. Okay, sago flour. Others are in lumps like this, and after that, it's broken up to make sago flour. Now, you have just heard Raymond telling us one of the food dishes that can be made from sago flour, and there are also a lot that can be made. So probably the food dish that Raymond has told us, I believe they use sago and ripe bananas, which is known as sago and banana porridge, whatever is made. Now, our lesson activity, you will be having the guest speaker, and you are to listen and take note and record the different stages in processing sago. Your second activity is also to write down the food group that sago belongs to. Now, we had a look at different food groups, and sago belongs to one of those food groups. You also have to write down the nutrient that sago contains. And with that, I'd like to welcome our guest speaker.
Good morning, 7C.
Good morning, Mrs. Toka.
Okay, you may take your seat. Okay, I'll be talking about the sago processing in Manus, how our people process their sago in the region. Okay, although there are different provinces might have different ways of processing sago and preparing it. But that's in a particular area where I come from, we have our different ways. Mostly in my area, only the men have certain areas to perform or responsibility to take in processing differently from the women. But looking at various provinces in Papua New Guinea, they might also be different also as men and women. Okay, as we go through the processing, looking at our area, people go in certain times using certain materials in preparing the sago. Though it's a hard job, but as we have learned that sago is a plant that is suitable for Papua New Guineans as a special staple food for special occasions and regions. Okay, I'd like to start from the process. Okay, the first step is cutting down a mature sago palm tree using an axe to split the outer bark on both sides of the palm, getting ready to be beaten. This is done by the men. Okay, the word which I have used, mature. When you see a sago tree which has produced a lot of flowers, that is the mature plant that has to be chopped down, ready for the processing of sago. Other trees without flowers are not suited for the processing. So when the splitting of the outer bark of the palm is done, it is getting ready to be pounding or beaten. Okay, to the second step. Second step, the man uses the beating stick that is similar to a hoe or a oaking bat to beat the sago flesh out from the palm into small pieces. Okay, it is only done by the men. When the pieces are beaten, it is beaten into the inside of the palm, where some areas they sit inside the palm in order to beat the sago, whereas in my province, no. The man stand and uses the beating stick to pound the flesh from the center into the edge of the palm tree, which has been splitted. Looking at that stage, in my area it is done by the men, but in other provinces, I think the women are doing that. Whereas in West New Britain, it is only done by the men. On the third step, the beaten sago flesh are collected and put into baskets or bags carried away to the woman. Then the woman pour the sago flesh into a bag attached or sewn onto the big sago stalk to be squeezed. In the process of squeezing, to make the flesh into small bits and pieces, because when they are beaten, some of the flesh are big. So the ladies have to squeeze them, ready for the processing of the juice. After the women have been squeezing the sago flesh into bits and pieces, it is ready to be washed. Water is added into the squeezed flesh for several times to allow the sago juice to flow through the bag into the moon canoe. Okay, the washing and squeezing have to continue until the water is clear from the sago flesh to see that the juice has been finished before it is thrown away. And then the new sago flesh is put into the bag for the processing to be continued. Okay, our fifth steps. When the sago juice is full to the edge of the moon canoe, the washing stops because the juice is being pouring out from the side that we cannot continue on washing. So the leftover bags of sago have to be put back for the next day. Okay, then half an hour is given to allow the sago to settle at the hollow of the moon canoe. So when the sago juice is getting down to the hollow part of the canoe, it allows the water to rise up to the top, and only the sago is getting down to the bottom part. And this part which is going down is very sticky, and it gets stuck to the part of the moon canoe. The 6 steps. Finally, the man comes in after the sago has been settled down for half an hour. They come to overturn the canoe just to allow the water only on the surface to be poured out or be removed, and leaving the sticky substance stuck onto the hollow of the canoe. Okay, this sticky substance is then scooped using a wooden spoon into special baskets like the one that you can see on the screen, which is very wet and sticky. As it gets down to the bottom of the special basket, the side of the basket absorbs the stickiness of the sago. Then it is hung on poles to get dry. So these poles are made in special sago house made of sago leaves, which are built in the bush, where these sagos are kept for 3 to 5 days in order to get dry and become hard like what you have seen in the dish. Okay, so as the sago gets dry after 3 to 5 days, it becomes like this powdered sago that you can see in the dish or the bowl. So that is the ending part of our processing of sago. Okay. The other thing that you can see, there are 2 different colors in the sago. The colors are different depending on the water which we are washing the sago with. If the water is clean, then you'll see the color of the sago becomes red or orange. But if using the dirty water, you see that the color of the sago becomes gray in color. And sometimes it's smelly depending on the water which is used to wash the sago. Okay, after the sago is being put into powder type, we have different ways of cooking them also. In our area, our people usually have different occasions for preparing this sago. Okay, when people are going for long journeys, sago are made using coconut cream, and it is wrapped with the leaves put over the copper. Whereas in my area we don't have mumu stone, so we don't mumu it, but we put it over the copper so that the heat cooks the sago. So people can take it to travel for more than 1 or 2 weeks, that the sago could not get spoiled, and it can be eaten though it's very hard. Okay, another way to be eaten in one particular day or agent eating for a meal, we mix it with a coconut and it is fried. It is fried over the frying pan, and then coconut is mixed with it. That is the meal where people can eat it as soon as it is prepared. So there are different ways also prepared in other provinces compared to my area. Okay, to those receiving schools up in islanders or people along the coast, looking at the steps of processing sago, you may have an idea and seen and implementing something that you might want to do when you're down in the coastal area where there are sago grown there. Different areas have different ways of preparing different ways of cooking sago. But sago is very important, and it's a staple food where most of Papua New Guineans like to eat. Okay, that brings us to the end of the lesson. Thank you for listening.
Students in the receiving schools and the model class, we have just had Mrs. Loga, one of our teachers at this school. She's from Manus. You've just had her going through the different stages in processing sago. And that is done in the area where she comes from in Manus. Now, there sago is eaten in many parts of the country, and the way sago is processed in your area may be different from Mrs. Loga's area in Manus. So our next follow-up lesson, you can try to compare how sago is processed in your area to what you have heard from Mrs. Loga. You've also heard where it said from an area men, it's the men's role to pound sago pit, while in other areas probably the women do it. And you have seen one of slides showing a picture of a woman pounding the sago pit. Sago, as we have heard earlier in the lesson, is a tree of life, as in many parts of the coastal provinces. For your information, students in the receiving schools, especially the ones in the highlands, a lot of people in the coastal areas depend on sago. And sago is the staple food for a lot of people in the coastal areas. And I'd like to call upon Angeline to, on behalf of the model class and the receiving school students, to thank our guest speaker for that knowledge that she has passed on to us, especially the people of Manus, how they process sago. If I can have Angeline, please.
On behalf of 7Cs and the receiving schools, we would like to thank you, Mrs. Loga, for your time. And we are very privileged to know about sago. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Angeline. And once again, thank you, Mrs. Loga. Who can tell us what our key phrase is? Okay, Ovin.
Guest speaker.
Now, our key phrase is sago processing. And teachers in the receiving schools, our next lesson activity is going to be, and the students too, our next lesson is going to be on a follow-up on what we have had. And I hope students in the receiving schools and the model class, you have especially taken note or recorded the main sago processing stages. And as I have said, once we come to that next lesson, you can try to compare that together, the guest speakers' province, how they process sago to your own, how it's done in your own place. And with that, good morning, students in the model class, the receiving school students, and your teachers.
Receiving schools is your reference for the next lesson: strand, substrand, outcome, topic, materials, and reference.